Hi, I'm Karen Rice and I'm going to be showing you how to paint some beautiful spring crocus flowers in watercolour. Here is the finished painting, and this painting features in the May edition of the Leisure Painter. It is available today from the 19th of March, and if you'd like to get hold of a copy, I will have details in the description below. This painting is really accessible for beginners especially. I show you a simple step-by-step process of building up the painting, working light to dark, using just a few colours. So I hope you really are inspired to maybe paint something like this and also find the tutorial helpful in your watercolour journey. So let's get started. And if you'd like to know the materials that I've used, check out the description below where it will give you a full list of the colours that I've used also and alternatives. I've sketched out my drawing. I've used an HB pencil on 300 grams cold pressed paper. The outline sketch for this tutorial is available on my Patreon membership, and details about that can be found in the description below. I'm using ultramarine and some opera rose. You could use cobalt blue and permanent rose. A blue and a pink will be perfect for this. I've mixed them together to create this lovely violet colour. I'm using my size 6 brush and I'm painting wet on dry. Water is my friend here, so I'm dropping in water as well to make the paint lighter. The more pigment you add, the darker the wash. The more water you add, the lighter the wash. I've actually swapped now to my large size 14 brush for these larger petals here on the left, working wet on dry. I'm trying to create some variety in the colours, so sometimes I'll use a little bit more pink and sometimes I'll use a little bit more blue, and I'll drop in water. But this first layer, we want it nice and pale. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my size 6 brush and drop in some creamier paint just to create some soft edges and slightly darker marks, as what I'm doing now. So I'm just dropping in, so the paint hasn't got as much water in it. So I'm painting damp into wet. So the surface is wet, but my brush isn't as wet. And I'm just adding a touch more sort of darker marks at the top of the crocuses here, damp into damp, just to create a little bit more detail there. So I've dried off my painting now and I've wet the background. I'm mixing up a yellow wash here with some Quinacridone gold. You can use any yellow, and if you don't have Quinacridone gold, you could use raw sienna or yellow ochre. I'm using really expressive brush marks just to get some sort of movement in the background there, but basically I just want to avoid painting on top of the crocuses. I've added a little tiny bit of pink now to my yellow to make it more of an orangey colour. To be quite honest, you could paint any sort of background colour. You could have some blue sky and some green grasses. I've actually mixed up some ultramarine with some yellow here, using my size 6 brush, painting wet into wet the grasses just to get the detail there. And I'm using my size 6 brush to put a slightly creamier orange colour now. That's the pink and the yellow, just cutting in around the edges of the crocus to really bring them out. I'm sprinkling now some sea salt. You could use table salt on top of the painting, and it's damp, it's not too wet, and I've allowed it to dry naturally. As you can see here, it creates lovely effects. So my painting is completely dry, and I'm building up now some stronger tones on the crocuses using my size 6 brush with a mixture of the ultramarine and the pink. Now, just to say, look how much stronger that is because I'm using less water and more pigment. So I'm going to paint each petal now using the mixture of the ultramarine and the opera rose, working my way round to build up these mid-tones on the crocuses. nice technique in watercolour is to use watercolour pencils, and I'm using an Emery board here. You could use sandpaper, and it's just to rub the pencil tip against the Emery board or sandpaper, and the pigment falls off onto the damp paper and it creates some lovely textures. So I'm building up now the grasses wet on dry using my size 6 brush with a mixture of the yellow and ultramarine. It's quite a sort of a yellowy green here, and just sort of press down and lift up as you're painting these grasses to get the sort of very thin pointy edge at the top there is quite helpful. What I'm doing now is the painting is dry, the crocuses are dry, so I'm just building up now. I finish off with watercolours with darks and details, and I'm just softening the edges here and there. So I paint down the dark and then use a damp clean brush to soften and push back a little bit to finish off the crocuses. Just giving my painting a little spatter here with my size 6 brush with a mixture of the ultramarine and some yellow. It's quite a darkish green, and it just gives a bit of texture, but it also stops me from fiddling with my painting, remembering watercolour, less is more. I'm using some white gouache now. You could use white watercolour paint, and it's just to introduce some light on the edges of the petals. I didn't use masking fluid here. And actually white paint's really useful at the end of a watercolour painting if you do lose some of your lights, those little highlights. Sometimes we get carried away in watercolour, so never fear, gouache is here. So here is my finished painting. I really hope you've enjoyed this step-by-step tutorial. It's really a lovely one to do because it's quite simple, just building up those layers, maybe just 3 layers, light, medium and dark tones. You've got that lovely atmospheric background with the wet on wet washes and the salt, and just those grasses, couple of layers of light and mid and dark toned grasses with a spatter to finish off. If you have any questions about this tutorial, please put them in the comments section below. And if you'd like to see more tutorials like this, why not subscribe to my YouTube channel where you'll get updates of my latest tutorials. And if you'd like to see a longer tutorial of the crocuses with access to a sketch outline, it is ad-free and you can cancel anytime. Why not check out my Patreon membership? Details about that can be found in the description below. Thank you again for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.